It makes a relationship between two different classes. One class is students. The other class is clever people. So it's making a relationship between the class of students and the class of intelligent people or clever people. That is the nature of a categorical proposition. So when we look at the example I just gave, all students are clever. What it simply says is that any member who belongs to the class of students is included in the class of clever people. In other words, members of the class of students are included in the class of intelligent people. So it is simply making a relationship between these two different classes, indicating whether they are, all of them are included or excluded from the other class. That is the nature of a categorical proposition. Now, there are 4 different types of categorical propositions. But before we get to the 4 different types, we need to look at 2 key component parts of a categorical proposition. We have said that it can be divided into 2 parts. If I say all students are clever, one class is students, the other class is clever people. The class of students is what we call the subject class or the predicate, the subject class or the subject term. The class of intelligent people is what is called the predicate class or predicate term. So every categorical proposition has 2 classes, the subject class or term, and then the predicate class or predicate term. Some nurses are lazy. The subject class is nurses. The predicate class is lazy. Now we have 4 types of categorical propositions. 4 types of categorical propositions. 1, universal affirmative proposition. Universal affirmative proposition. It makes a positive claim about 2 classes. A positive claim about 2 classes universally. It makes a positive claim about 2 classes universally. In other words, it claims that all members of the subject class are included in the predicate class. All members of the subject class are included in the predicate class. Universal affirmative. All farmers are hardworking. That's a universal affirmative proposition. That members of the class of farmers are all included in the class of hard-working people. So it makes a positive claim about 2 classes universally. In other words, it claims that members of the subject class are all included in the predicate class. Then we have universal negative proposition. Universal negative proposition. A universal negative proposition makes a claim that all members of the subject class are excluded from the predicate class. All members of the subject class are excluded from the predicate class. No women are liars. No women are liars. So this example shows that if you belong to the class or any member or members of the class of women are excluded from the class of liars. That if you see any woman at all, worldwide, that woman is not in the class of liars. Universal negative proposition. Then we have particular affirmative proposition. It makes a claim that some members of the subject class are included in the predicate class. Some women are liars. At least one member of the class of women is a member of the class of liars. So women are liars. So some, you can identify at least one, it could be more of the members of the class of women who belong to the class of liars. And then the fourth type is a particular negative proposition. It makes a claim that some members of the subject class are excluded from the predicate class. Some members of the subject class are excluded from the predicate class. Some women are not liars. Some members of the class of women do not belong to the class of liars. Particular negative proposition. So we've identified the four kinds of categorical proposition. There are only four, none more than four. We have universal affirmative proposition. That makes a claim that members of the class, of the subject class, all belong to the predicate class. All students are thieves. And then universal negative proposition makes a claim that all members of the subject class are excluded from the predicate class. No students are thieves. And then the third one, particular affirmative proposition. It makes a claim that some members of the subject class are included in the predicate class. Some students are thieves. And then the fourth one, particular negative proposition. It makes a claim that some members of the subject class are not included in the predicate class. Some students are not thieves. Good. So these four kinds of categorical propositions are represented with letters so that we will not be mentioning their names in full. They are represented with letters. Anytime you find a universal affirmative proposition, it is represented with the letter A. Anytime you find a universal negative proposition, it is represented with the letter E. Particular affirmative proposition represented with the letter I, and particular negative proposition represented with the letter O. So we have A for universal affirmative, E for universal negation, I for particular affirmative, and O or particular negation. Now, we said when we say all students are dangerous, we can use a Venn diagram to illustrate our claim. All students are dangerous. We will have to get a Venn diagram to give a picture form of our claim. So before we can do that, we have to convert our proposition into what is called a schema. We have to condense it to all students are dangerous. We'll still repeat our all. Instead of students, we use the letter S to represent students. And dangerous, we use the letter D. Now, are there changes to A, to S, because it's only one S. So the class of students with the letter S, the class of dangerous people with the letter D. So now have all S is D. Instead of all students are dangerous, all S is D. Now, having written our schema, we now draw a Venn diagram with two overlapping circles. So we have two overlapping circles here, and then we label the circles. Label one S, one D. So S here is student, class of students. D here, class of dangerous people. We say all S is D. So we have to find all of S in D. But we realize that some part of S is not in D. The intersected area is where we have S being part of what? D. So to show that all S is D, we shade the portion of S that is not intersecting with D, or that is not inside D. We shade that portion. When you shade the portion, it means that that portion here, this portion, the shaded area, has been cut off. The shaded area has been cut off. It is no longer S. S is only the small part, which is inside D. That is the illustration of all S is D. For a universal affirmative, where the area which is not intersecting with the predicate class, you shade that place off. When you shade that place off, the implication or the meaning is that that place has been cut off. And it's no more S. S is only this one, the intersected area of the two circles. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Now, when we come to universal negation, no students are dangerous. We'll have our scheme, we'll still have our no, where students will be S, D will be dangerous, dangerous will be D, and then we'll change our no S is D. So draw a Venn diagram, label the Venn diagram S and D. We said no member of S is a member of D, but we have the intersected area where we have some members of S who are members of D. So we shade that portion off. When we shade that portion off, the meaning is that that portion has been cut off. It is no more S. So S is only the area which is not intersecting with D. No S is D. And then some S is D. Now, some students are dangerous. Now, some S is D. As usual, we we have the two circles, label them S and D. We said some members of S are members of D. So the intersected area is where we have some members of S are members of D. This time, no more shading. So where they are intersecting, put X there to show that at least one member of S, who's X, is a member of D. At least one member of S, and this member is X, is a member of D. So with some, no shading, we only put X in the intersected area. And then we have some students are not dangerous. No S, sorry, some S is not D. Some S is not D. So we have our diagram, label it S and D. We said some members of S, that's where we do not have an intersection. Some members of S are not members of D. So we put X in the area which is not of S, which is not intersecting with D. So put X here to show that at least one member of S, who is X, is not a member of D. So I guess you have seen how we can use a Venn diagram to illustrate them. Is it clear to you?
Sir, the last one we just did, why didn't we shade the middle?
No, we can't shade the middle. We are saying that some members of S are not members of D. By implication, it means that some members of S are members of D, but some are not. So if you shade here.
All right. Okay.
Yes. So we'll put X here, where they are not members. So here they are it means that here they are members. Here, where we have not, we put the X, they are not members. If we shade here, we'll make a mistake. It means we are simply saying that some members of S are not members of D. That's why we shaded it. We cut it off. So we are saying that some members of S, yes, some members of S are not members of D. That's why we cut it off. But if we say some members of S are members of D, are not members of D, it means that some members of S are members of D, some are not. So we don't shade the area, the intersected area. We only put an X where they are not members. Are you clear now?
Yes, sir.
Good. Now let's identify certain words. We have already said that categorical propositions have classes. There are two classes, subject class and predicate class. The word that joins the subject class and the predicate class together is called copula, C-O-P-U-L-A. The word. So if I say all students are dangerous, the word that is joining the class of students and the class of dangerous people is the word are. It is copula. If I say all S is D, the word that is joining the class of S with the class of D is the word is. So the copula is linking the two classes together. We have the quantifier, which is the same as the quantity. Quantifier is talking about the number of the members of the subject class and the predicate class that we are talking about. The number. Quantity, quantifier, we're always looking at the number. So if you say all students, the word all is saying that we are referring to an entire quantity. If you say some, it says that we are referring to a segment of the universal set, not all of them. If we say no, it means we are referring to all members of the universal set in a negative way. So the word that can help us to identify the quantity we are referring to in a categorical proposition is called a quantifier or quantity. And words such as no or some are words that help us know the quantity we are referring to. And then we have the quality. The quality is a word that tells us whether the proposition, the statement is negative or affirmative. Affirmative means it's a positive statement. A negative statement or a positive statement. Any word in the proposition that helps us to identify whether it is a negative statement or a positive statement is what we call quality. So here again, we have all. All is quality. It is not, because it's showing that it is positive. No is negative. Not is negative. Because so if I say all students are dangerous, all is put in a positive sense. No students are dangerous. No is negative. Some students are not dangerous. Not is negative. So any word that helps us to identify whether the statement is affirmative or negative is quality. And then we have distribution. So they have already talked about quantity. We have this. Are you clear with the explanation?
Yes, sir.
Then we have distribution. It is the attribute of the categorical statement that indicates whether all members or some members of the classes are those that we are referring to or not. In other words, an attribute that tells us whether reference is made to all members. Reference is made that all members are included or excluded from another class. We are talking about the relationship of the two classes. So any attribute that helps us to know whether all members of the subject class are included or excluded from the predicate class, or all members of the predicate class are included or excluded from the subject class. Any attribute, any sign that helps us to know this is called distribution. We have learned distribution in maths. When one term is distributed over other terms. So here, distribution is simple telling us whether if you have the subject class, we are saying that all members of the subject class are either included or excluded from the predicate class. Or if we have the predicate class, whether we are saying all members of the predicate class are included or excluded from the subject. So for distribution, we are talking about all of them. It's interested in all members, either included or excluded from another class. So if you have universal affirmative, all students are intelligent. We have first, before you go to the distribution, you identify the classes. Our class here is students, and our second class is intelligent. So the students is our subject class, intelligent our predicate class. Now, what he's saying is that all members of the class of students are in the class of intelligent people. So students here is distributed because all of them are included in the class of intelligent people. So in the universal affirmative proposition, the subject class is distributed. So all of them are included in the predicate class. But the predicate class is not distributed. So the predicate class is undistributed because it is not saying that all members of the class of intelligent people are included in the class of students. So anytime you have a universal affirmative proposition, the subject class is distributed, but the predicate class is not distributed. So all students are intelligent. If you want to know whether it is the same, then turn it around. All intelligent people are students. Is that what it says? All students are intelligent. Does it mean all intelligent people are students? Hello?
Sir, not
No,
necessarily.
sir. No, sir.
They are not the same.
No, sir.
So it means that it is not distributing the predicate class. It is only the subject class it is distributing. It is putting the subject class in the predicate class. Then we have universal negative proposition. No students are intelligent. That members of the class of intelligent or of students are not found in the class of intelligent people. Is it this? Those students are intelligent? Can it be taken as no intelligent people are students? Are they the same?
No, no, no. No, sir. Don't.
If you are a student, you are not in the class of intelligent people. If you are an intelligent person, you are not in the class of students.
No, they're not the same.
No students are intelligent. Hmm? No men are brave. If no men are brave, then any brave person we see is not a man. We are saying no men are brave. So no single person who is brave is a man. So no men are brave. If no men are brave, then no brave person is a man. So if no students are intelligent, no member of the class of students belongs to the class of intelligent people. So that if you see any intelligent person, that person should not be a student. So you find that the two statements are the same. No students are intelligent. Students are not found in the class of intelligent people. Therefore, intelligent people cannot be found in the class of students. So the two are the same. So no students are intelligent. They say all members of the class of students cannot be found in the class of intelligent people. At the same time, all members of the class of intelligent people cannot be found in the class of students. The no is going through all of them. So in this case, with universal negative proposition, the subject class is distributed, the predicate class is also distributed. Are you okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Then we have particular affirmative proposition. Some students are intelligent. It is not saying all students. So it is not distributing the class of students in the class of intelligent people. For distribution, must be talking about all of them. So it is not distributing the class of students over the class. Or some students are intelligent. It also means some intelligent people are students, but not all of them. So in a particular affirmative proposition, the subject class is undistributed. The predicate class is also undistributed because it's not distributing all of them. It's distributing only some. And once it's some, it is not distribution. But it is only distribution when it is all of them. And then particular negative proposition. Some students are not intelligent. Some students are not intelligent. So with this one, the subject class is not distributed. But not intelligent, all intelligent people are not in the class of students. Not intelligent. So all intelligent people are not necessarily in the class of students. That's why it's not intelligent. It means all intelligent people are not necessarily in the class of students. So with particular negative proposition, the subject class is undistributed, but the predicate class is distributed. So for distribution, universal affirmative, only the subject class is distributed. The predicate class is not distributed. For universal negative proposition, the subject class is distributed, the predicate class is distributed. For particular affirmative proposition, the subject class is undistributed, the predicate class is undistributed. And then for particular negative, the subject class is undistributed, but the predicate class is distributed. Are we okay? Now, let's remember we said anytime we have these categorical propositions, represent letters. A for universal affirmative proposition, E for universal negative proposition, I for particular affirmative proposition, and O for particular negative proposition. Do you remember? Hello, class?
Yes, sir.
Good. So now we are going to make use of these letters. But before we make use of these letters, we must explain what is meant by immediate inference. Immediate inference. When logicians use the term immediate inference, what they mean is that you are making an argument where you have only one premise, and on the basis of that premise, you draw a conclusion. So immediate inference will only have two statements or two propositions. One is a premise, the other is a conclusion. So if you want, you can say two statements. One statement is a premise or the evidence. The other statement is the conclusion. Immediate inference. Right, so we are going to use our letters. We are going to pair or make a combination of the four kinds of categorical propositions to see what result it will give us. If you have, so what we are saying, if you have A versus E, universal affirmative proposition versus universal affirmative proposition versus universal negative proposition. When the two of them interact, for one to be a premise, the other to be a conclusion, we get what is called contrary opposition. A contrary opposition is an opposition between two universals or two universal propositions of different quality. two universal propositions of different quality. We talk about quality means affirmative or negative. Two universal propositions of different quality. And we have only two universal propositions. One is universal affirmative, the other is universal negation. So anytime you have an interaction, an opposition, a logical relationship between a universal affirmative and a universal negation, you are dealing with contrary position. So one of them will be your premise, the other will be your conclusion, depending on which one you start as your premise. And then you have contradictory opposition. A contradictory opposition is an opposition between a universal proposition and a particular proposition of different quality. A universal proposition and a particular proposition of different quality. So the quality is not the same. So if the universal is affirmative, the particular will be negative. If the universal is negative, the particular is affirmative, but the quality is not the same. So you have a logical interaction between a universal affirmative versus particular negation, or a universal negation versus particular affirmative. When you have this logical interaction, you get a contradictory opposition. You always say that, oh, that's a contradiction, that's a contradiction. This is what constitutes a contradiction, where you make a claim in a universal affirmative proposition, and then you interact that with a particular negative proposition. You know, so you will say all ladies are the same. All ladies are the same. Universal affirmative. Then you turn around and say, oh, but my lady is good. She's a nice lady. That's a contradiction. If you accept that all ladies are the same, your lady is within the universal set. So your lady cannot be different from all that you claim to be what they say. Then you have sub-contrary opposition. Sub-contrary opposition. It is a logical interaction between two particular propositions of different quality. We have only two particular propositions that are of different quality. Particular affirmative versus particular negation. When you have an opposition or logical interaction between a particular affirmative versus a particular negation, it is called a sub-contrary opposition. And then the final one, when you have a logical interaction or opposition between a universal and a particular of the same quality. A universal and a particular of the same quality. So it's universal affirmative versus particular affirmative, or universal negation versus particular negation, the same quality. So we have four here, four different types of opposition: contrary opposition, contradictory opposition, sub-contrary opposition, and subordination opposition. Subordination, where we have a universal and a particular of the same quality. So because they are four, when you do the combination of the four of them, you get four. It is called a square of opposition. A square has four sizes. And because we are getting four different ways of combination to get opposition. We have a square of opposition. So we'll draw a square to illustrate the opposition. We know that when you have your square, at the top left corner, put A there. A is what? Universal affirmative. At the top right corner, put E there, universal negation. At the bottom left corner, put I there, particular affirmative. And at the bottom right corner, put O there, particular negation. And then draw a diagonal line linking E and I. At the same time, a diagonal line linking A and O, for us to get the square of opposition. We have this, we have this, we have this, we have this. So A versus E, this is what we call contrary opposition, contraries. They are never the same, contraries. If one is true, the other is false. Contraries. Opposition between particular affirmative versus particular negation. We have sub-contraries. Opposition between universal affirmative versus particular affirmative, or universal negation versus particular negation, subalternation. Then we have the contraries or contradictories. Universal affirmative versus particular negation, or universal negation versus particular affirmative, contradictories. So I've used this table to illustrate what we have just explained above. A versus E, contraries. I versus O, sub-contraries. A versus I or E versus O, subalternation. A versus O or E versus O, contradictories. Is the table clear? Is the diagram clear? Sorry, not the table. The diagram clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Now we move into the explanation. How to make logical conclusions. I'm going to make an argument. So we'll start with the analysis of a contrary opposition. Contrary opposition, we said it is A versus E, universal affirmative versus universal negation. So all men are wise. A's opposite, universal one, will be no men are wise. Now, one, remember we said we are making an argument. One is going to be our premise, the other is going to be our conclusion. Now to be able to test the validity, or to determine whether our conclusion is valid, we assume that one of them is a premise, the other is a conclusion. You can decide which one you want to use as your premise. So let's assume that the A statement is our premise. All men are wise. It is true. Let's assume that it is true. This statement is true. If it is true, our conclusion, no men are wise, will it also be true? Our premise is all men are wise. We are assuming that it is true. If it is true, what will be the truth value of our conclusion? Our conclusion would then be no men are wise. What will be the truth value? Hello?
Some men are wise.
Huh? No. We are saying all men are wise. That's our premise. And our conclusion is going to be no men are wise. If all men are, we can't bring any other statement into this. These are the two statements that are forming your argument. One is a premise, the other is a conclusion. So if all men are wise, we assume that it is true. What will be the truth value of our conclusion? No men are wise. Will it be true or false? Here we are interested in true or false. Hello? Oh, you're not getting it.
No, sir, you are a little bit confused.
We are saying that immediate inference, you have one premise. On the basis of that premise, you draw a conclusion. So we have two statements here. All men are wise. We are looking at contrary opposition. We say contrary opposition is made up of universal affirmative versus universal negation. All men are wise. Its negation will be no men are wise. And these two statements are going to form our argument. One of them is a premise. The other is a conclusion. You can't bring any other statement into this. Only these two statements form our argument. And we are saying that we analyze it using assumptions. So you use assumptions as a basis to be able to analyze contrary opposition. And we are saying, to begin with the assumptions, begin to say that one of them is your premise, the other is a conclusion. So when you are done with this, you move to the next leg of assumptions. The second is that assume that the premise is true. So if the premise is true, we said truth value means whether a statement is true or false. So if the premise is assumed to be true, what will be the truth value of your conclusion? If all men are wise, it's true. That's our premise. If it is true, we can't turn around and say that no men are wise. So if you accept all men are wise, all of you are wise to be true, then our conclusion that no one of you is wise is false.
Okay.
It cannot be so. The two of them cannot be true at the same time. If we accept that Ghanaians are hospitable, it is true. You can't turn around and say that no Ghanaians are hospitable. If we accept that Ghanaians are hospitable is true, then its opposite, no Ghanaians are hospitable, is false. Because the two of them cannot be true at the same time. They are contrary. Do you get it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
So no men are wise. If our premise, if we use that as our premise, and we assume that is true, all men in the world, they are wise. We can't turn around and say that no men in the world are wise. In other words, all men in the world are not wise. That's what it means. All men in the world are not wise. If we say all men in the world are wise, we can't turn around and say that there's no man in the world that all of them are not wise. That's a contrary opposition. So if the premise is assumed to be true, the conclusion is false. Now, what if the premise is false? Would the conclusion be true? All men are wise. Our statement is false. What will be the truth value of our conclusion? Will it be false? Will it be true?
It will be true.
All men are wise. So the entire universal set, they are saying all men are wise. They say, oh, that is not true. It's false. If it's false, of course, it can make this one to be true. But it can also make this one, our conclusion, to be false. If your premise is false, the conclusion can be true, it can be false. If all men are wise is false, one reason why it can be false is that some men are wise, some are not wise. All of you are clever. All the students are clever. And I say, no, this is not true. It may not be true because some students are clever, some are not clever. It may not be true because all of you are not clever. So if all men are wise, if it is our premise and it is true, it is false, our conclusion can be true, it can be false. It can be true when we say that, in fact, no men are wise. It can be false because our answer will be some men are wise, some are not wise. So immediately, we are talking about immediate inference. Immediately, we cannot tell whether our conclusion, no men are wise, is true or false. So we'll say that our conclusion cannot be determined. It's based on further investigation to know whether some men are wise, some are not wise, is true or false, before we can get to our conclusion. So if our premise is false, our conclusion is undetermined. We can't tell the truth value immediately. So you put U undetermined there. So let me see the analysis here. So if the premise is true, the conclusion is false. But if the premise is false, the conclusion can be true, it can be false. So because it can be true, it can be false, it means it's getting to truth values. So you can't determine whether it is true or false immediately. So you put U there, undetermined. So what do? You draw the same square of opposition, the way we labeled it, A, E, I, O. Within the square, draw a small square inside. A small square inside attached to the one you are using as your premise. So when you see the small square here, it means A is our premise. The universal affirmative is our premise, and we are saying A is true. Then you draw an arrow pointing to your conclusion. Then you put F there. The one with the small square attached to it is your premise. So within the small square, I have put T there, which means my premise is true. If my premise is true, then I draw an arrow pointing to my conclusion, and I put F against my conclusion. If my premise is false, I draw an arrow pointing to my conclusion. My conclusion is undetermined, because if the universal affirmative is false, the universal negation can also be false, but it can be true. So because we are getting two answers, we put U there, undetermined, for now. So what the rule we are getting from contrary opposition is that at least one of the statements in contrary opposition is false. And both cannot be true at the same time. At least one is false, and both cannot be true at the same time. It means when you say at least one is false, it means that both can be false, but both cannot be true. But at least all the time, one is false. At least one. And both cannot be true at the same time. Contrary opposition. In other words, both can be false at the same time, but both cannot be true at the same time. Are you okay?
Yes, sir.
I know this is a little bit complex when you are using all this. Then we have contradictory opposition. Contradictory is the easiest of them. If one is true, the other is false. If the other is false, the other is true. Contradictory. contradictory is not like contrary. With contradictory, both cannot be true at the same time, and both cannot be false at the same time. If one is true, the other is false. So at least one is true, and at least, no, not at least, one is true and one is false. So anytime the universal affirmative is true, the particular negation is false. Anytime the universal affirmative is false, the particular negation is true. Anytime the particular negation is true, the universal affirmative is false. Anytime the particular negation is false, the universal affirmative is true. If you use universal negation, anytime the universal negation is true, the particular affirmative is false. Anytime the universal negation is false, the particular affirmative is true. Anytime the particular affirmative is true, the universal negation is false. Anytime the particular affirmative is false, the universal negation is true. Both cannot be true at the same time, and both cannot be false at the same time. So as we said, I did this to illustrate it. In the exam, you can only use one, not to illustrate the two of them using the square. So the universal affirmative versus particular negation. Universal affirmative here is my premise. It is true. And I draw an arrow pointing to my conclusion, which is the particular negation, false. Universal negation, on the other hand, if you use the universal negation as your premise and it is true, you draw an arrow pointing to your particular affirmative and it is false. On the other hand, if you use particular affirmative as your premise and it is true, you draw an arrow pointing to your universal negation and it is false. If you use particular negation as your premise and it is true, you draw an arrow pointing to your universal affirmative and it will be false. So if you use false, false, if your universal affirmative is false, you draw an arrow pointing to the particular negation and it will be true. If your universal negation is false, you draw an arrow pointing to your particular affirmative and it is true. So if you use the particular one as your premise and particular affirmative is false, you draw an arrow pointing to universal negation and it is true. If you use particular negation as your premise and it is false, you draw an arrow pointing to your universal affirmative and it will be true. So you see that we don't have an instance where both can be true at the same time. We don't have an instance where both can be false at the same time. If your premise is true, the conclusion is false. If your premise is false, the conclusion is true. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
So this is how sometimes I set the exam questions. Given A as true, A versus O, that's contrary. If A is true, O cannot be true. So I'm asking you to determine whether these inferences are true or false. So if A is true, and I say my conclusion is true, that's false. It's not valid. If my premise is, that's the one given A, assuming that A is true, assuming that universal affirmative is true. So given A, or assuming that the universal affirmative statement is true, the particular negative statement is false. So it's true. So my inference here is valid. This is contradictory. So you go through them and you'll get some of my exam questions. Now let's move on to the analysis of subordination. Subordination, we have a universal and a particular of the same quality. So if the universal is affirmative, the particular is affirmative. If the universal is negative, the particular is negative. So all men are womanizers. If it is true, then if I see any group of men or even one man, then I'll say he's also a womanizer. Because if you have accepted that all men in the world are womanizers, then your father is also a womanizer. You yourself, you're a womanizer. Subordination. So with subordination, when the investor is true, the particular is by necessity true. All Ghanaians are clever. So if I meet some Ghanaians in my hometown, then they are also clever. That is if you accept the statement that all Ghanaians are clever is true. If I meet an illiterate man, if I meet a madman who is a Ghanaian, he's also clever. So for subordination, when the investor is true, the particular is true. But when the investor is false, the particular is undetermined. Because if the investor is false, all men are clever is false. It goes with some men are clever. If all men are clever is false, it could be that some men are clever is true. It could be that no men are clever is true. So if all men are clever is false, its opposite, which is no men are clever, can be true. It can also be that some men are clever, some are not clever. So because of that, we cannot immediately tell the truth value of the particular statement. So if the investor is false, the particular is undetermined. Now, if you use the particular as your premise to draw a conclusion about the investor, if the particular is true, the investor is undetermined. If some men are clever, it's true. It does not necessarily mean that all men are clever is true. If some men are clever, it's true. It could be that some are clever, some are not clever. And therefore, all men are clever cannot be said to be true. But if it is that some men are clever, it's true. It is possible that I only know some of them. Because I know some of them, I can't say all. I know some Ghanaians. I don't know others. So I say some Ghanaians are hospitable. But if I extend my research to all Ghanaians, it's possible that I will get the conclusion that all Ghanaians are hospitable. But I cannot jump to that conclusion immediately. So if my particular affirmative is true, the investor we cannot determine immediately its truth value. So we say it is undetermined. But if it's false, the investor is false. If all men are thieves, so if some men are thieves is false, then its bigger picture, all men are thieves, cannot be true. That is also false. So when the particular is false, it necessarily affects the conclusion, which is the investor, to be false. If all the mango fruits or some mango fruits are sweet, it's false. Then we cannot say all the mango fruits are sweet. It's true. It's also false because the subset makes the investor set. So if we identify some of them to be false, then the investor cannot be true. The investor is also certainly false because it's made up of all of them. So for subordination, both can be true at the same time and both can be false at the same time. So we can have the arrows like that. So when the investor is true, the particular is true. That's our premise. Because the particular is inside is a member of the investor. So if the investor is true, then the particular must be true. If the investor is true, the particular is true. Right? Now, if the particular is true, it's only talking about members of the investor set to be true. It could be that the entire investor set is true. It could be that the entire investor set cannot be said to be true. Only some of them are said to be true. Therefore, if the particular is true, the investor set cannot be determined. So we say we put you there. The same thing here. Now, if the investor is false, the entire investor set is false, we cannot tell about some members of the investor set. They are part of it. So if members are part of it, it could be that some members are false, some members are not false. It could be that all members here are not. So when the investor is false, the particular is undetermined. Same thing. But when the particular is false, the investor is false. Because if we say that if we take out the subset from the investor, we don't have an investor again. So when the particular is false, the investor is also false. That is for subordination. And then we have subcontrary. That's also a little bit complicated. Some students are clever. If it is true, our conclusion, some students are not clever. Will it be true?
Please come again.
If some students are clever, it's true. Our conclusion, some students are not clever. Will it be true?
It will be true, sir.
Yes, sir. It will be true. It will be true.
It will be true.
So it can be true. But don't forget that if some students are clever, it's true. It can also be that some students are not clever. It cannot be true. It's not
Yes,
by
sir.
all means. Now let's stand here. I know these students. These are my students. I know them. They are clever. Because of that, I can say all students are clever. I can't even judge other students that I don't know. So my students, because they are only a subset of the investor set of students, I'll say some students are clever. It is true. It does not necessarily mean that some are not clever. I am only making reference to those I know. Those I do not know, I cannot judge them until I know them. But if you say some students are clever, you are not by implication saying that some are not clever. This is critical analysis. So if I tell you, oh, some of my workers are, or some of the workers are good, it does not mean some necessarily mean that some are not good. The some here refers to those you have evaluated and known them. The others, you don't know them, so you've not evaluated them. So you can't say whether they are good or not. But when you extend your evaluation to them, you can get the conclusion that they are also good. So your statement will not tend to all workers are good. It could be that when you extend the evaluation to them, it could mean that indeed some of them, of the rest, are good, some are not good. So you get some workers are good, some workers are good. So when one is true, the other can be true, and it can also be undetermined. For subordination, so for subcontract. So for subcontract, both can be true at the same time, but both cannot be false at the same time. So this is just an illustration, so that we move away from this one. I have some few questions here. Converse, subversion, and contraposition. I have some few questions there. For converse, remember we said that every categorical proposition has two classes, the subject class and the predicate class. For converse, we are swapping their positions to determine whether, when we swap their positions and get a new statement, whether the new statement and the old statement are the same. Converse. So all men are thieves. We will swap the position of the subject and predicate term. All men are thieves. When we swap the positions, it will be all thieves are men. The original statement is what is called the convert. The original statement. When we turn it upside down, we'll get a converse or conversion. So all men are thieves. Is it the same as all thieves are men? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah.
All men belong to the class of thieves. Is it the same as all thieves belong to the class of men?
Yes, sir.
sir. I think so.
Then you are not getting it. That all men are a subset of the class of thieves. Is it saying the same thing that thieves are a subset of men?
No, they could include other group of people like women.
Yes, so all men are thieves mean that men are only a subset of the class of thieves. Men are included in the class of thieves. What that means is that there could be other sexes that are thieves. There could be even animals that are thieves. But men are only a subset of the class of thieves. It is not saying that all thieves are men, that if you see any thief at all in the world, it's a man. Here, the first one says, if you see any man at all, he's a thief. But the second one says, if you see any thief, he's a man. So with the first one, it is saying that men are just a subset of thieves. And the second one is saying that thieves are a subset of men. The two are not the same. It's like to say that all coins are currencies. All coins are currencies. When you turn it upside down, all currencies are coins. They are not the same. They are not the same. So for converse, when you have the universal affirmative, if you make a conversion out of it, it is not the same. So it is not valid. We are looking for consistency. That what you said is the same as the earlier one you made, especially when you are in court. You say all judges are corrupt. Then you say all judges are corrupt people. Then you say all corrupt people are judges. They are not the same. All politicians are corrupt people. It does not mean all corrupt people are politicians. Some people are corrupt, but they are not politicians. We are saying if you are a politician, then you are corrupt. It does not mean that if you are corrupt, then you are a politician. So the two are not the same.
Sir, question.
Therefore, yes.
So if I say, for example, most judges are corrupt. Now, if I turn it the other way around, it still doesn't.
We'll come to it. We'll come to it. That's where we have some.
Okay.
When you use the word most, it's the same as some.
Okay. All right.
Right? Let's take them one after the other.
Okay.
So if I say all students are fools, it's different from all fools are students. All students are fools means that if you see any student, anyone who belongs to the class of students, he's a fool. It does not mean that if you see any fool, if you see any member in the class of fools, then he's a student. There could be, for the first one, there could be that, there could be other fools. All students are fools. Students are only a drop in the class of what? Fools. But it does not mean that all fools are students. So when you convert, conversion for universal affirmative, the two are not the same. All Ghanaian jollofs are delicious, right? Are delicious food or are delicious. It does not mean that all delicious foods in Ghana are jollof. Jollof is delicious, but it does not mean that if you eat anything that is delicious, it means it is jollof. So for conversion, when you have a universal affirmative, the two are not the same. So if you make a statement like that in court, the court will see it to be inconsistent. If you say all thieves, all men are thieves, and you turn it around and say, oh, all thieves are men, it is inconsistent because the truth value of the two statements is not the same. Then for universal negation, all men, no men are thieves. No men are thieves. If we find any man, that man or any class, any member of the class of men is not in the class of thieves. So no man at all can be a thief. If no man at all can be a thief, no thief at all can be a man. If you catch any thief, or if you see any man, he's not a thief. Men are not thieves. Therefore, thieves cannot be men. So if no men are thieves, it's the same thing as no thieves are men. Are you getting it?
Yes, sir.
So you find that for universal negation, when you swap the positions of the predicate and the subject terms, you are getting the same statement. So the converse is valid for universal negation. So even if you mistakenly swap the positions and it's maybe something legal, I mean, the court will say that you are not, you are consistent. It's the same thing. They mean the same thing. You are signing a contract. You are reading a document that you are going to sign as a contract, and you see no men are thieves, and it turns around again, and in the other portion, no thieves are men. It is still the same thing. This is to broaden your understanding of swapping the positions of the predicate terms to mean whether they are the same or not. You know, people are smart. When they are drafting an agreement, so they will say all men are thieves. And because they want to make the agreement invalid for you, maybe in another breath, they turn it around. Not all men are thieves, and they turn it around. All thieves are men. But you are not analyzing it carefully to know whether the two statements are the same. And then you go and sign. Because of these two statements, it makes the agreement invalid, but the statements are not the same. But in the case of the second, even if they swap the positions, the statements still mean the same. So this is just providing a guidance for you to know all the agreements you sign. When you are looking at the terms of the agreement, you should be careful about how certain key sentences are constructed, whether these ones, they have swapped the positions. So if I say Kofi is going to school, it's not the same as the school is going to Kofi. It's not the same. Then we have particular affirmative proposition. Some men are thieves. If we swap the positions, some thieves are men. Are they the same? Are they the same?
Yes, sir.
Some men are thieves. Is it the same as some thieves are men?
Yeah, they are the same.
They are the same. So for
Yes, sir.
particular affirmative statements, when you convert, when the converted is turned into a conversion, the same thing. Some men are thieves, some thieves are men. And then you have the last one. Some men are not thieves. Some men are not thieves. Some men do not belong to the class of thieves. This is the same thing as some thieves are not men.
Yes, sir. That's already the same.
No. No.
No, okay, no.
Some men do not belong to the class of thieves. It does not mean that some thieves do not belong to the class of men.
Okay, it's clear, sir. They're not the same.
So for when you turn the positions, it's like usually I use the currency one. I say some currencies are coins, or some currencies are not coins. Some currencies are not coins. It's not the same as some coins are not currencies. You get it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Or if you say some men are not tall people, it does not mean that some tall people are not men.
Okay, sir.
Do you get it? So they are not the same.
Yes, sir.
Then we come to, before we come to overversion, let's go to contraposition. Then we'll come there because we'll use contraposition as a basis to be able to answer it. Contraposition, we said we are swapping positions. The first one, converse, we swap positions of the predicate and the subject terms. For contraposition, we are still swapping the positions, but we'll negate them. Just like when you have maths, 2 plus x is equals to 4. When you are moving x, to the place of x, the 2 to the place of 4, 2 will now become negative. So when we are moving thieves to the position of men, we now negate it. And when we move men to the position of thieves, so the R now is the equal sign. R is the equal sign. When you're moving men across R to position of thieves, it will become non-thieves, non-men. When you are moving thieves to the position of men, crossing the R, it will become non-thieves. So all men are thieves is contrapositive, is all non-thieves are non-men. Are they the same? All men are thieves. All men belong to the class of thieves. And saying those who do not belong to the class of thieves are not men. Are they the same? I guess your mind is getting exhausted. Positive, the same. Like if it rains, then I'll plant corn. If I did not plant corn, it did not rain. So for contrapositive, it's the same. Throughout all of them. All men are thieves. All men belong to the class of thieves. Then you say all those who are outside the class of thieves are outside the class of men. All those who are not thieves are not men. If all men are thieves, then all those who are not thieves are not men. No men are thieves. That is contrapositive. No non-thieves are non-men. No non-thieves. So no non-thieves means no, negative become positive. So it becomes all thieves. No non-thieves are non-men. That if you are a thief, then you are not in the class of men. If you are not in the class of thieves, then you are not in the class of what? So if you are not in the class of men, you are not in the class of thieves. And so when we turn it upside down, the same thing. If you are outside the class of thieves, then you are outside the class of men. So for contrapositive, all of them are the same. So if you say 2 plus 2 is equals to 4, then you can turn it upside and say 4 is equals to 2 plus 2. We are only doing the negation. Or no men are thieves. No non-thieves are men. Some men are thieves. Right? Some non-thieves are not non-men. And then the last one, some men are not thieves. Some non-thieves are non-men. They are all the same. So for contrapositive, it's the same for all of them. When you turn it upside down and negate it, it is valid. All Toyota cars are good. All Toyota cars are good. What it means is that if you find a car that is not good, then it is not Toyota. When you negate it, if you say all Toyota cars are good, then any car that is not good is not Toyota. So all Toyota cars are good. All non-good cars are non-Toyota. Not all cars, non-good cars means all cars that are not good are not Toyota cars. So when you convert, when you do the transportation and you negate it, it's the same. So all Ghanaians are hospitable. So any non-hospitable person is not a Ghanaian. The same thing. Now let's come to the obverse. Now with the obverse, we do the swapping. I really got it time. You do the swapping and then, no, that one you don't even need, sorry, you don't need the swapping. It's the same thing, but you negate the predicate term, change the subject term, the quantity of the subject that becomes a different quantity. The quality of the subject is changed to a different quality. All men are thieves. Now you change the quality. Oh, no. Our men will remain the same. And then will not change thieves to non-thieves. If all men are thieves, then no men are non-thieves. Are they the same? All men are found in the class of thieves. No man is found outside the class of thieves. Are they the same?
Yes, sir. They are the same. It means the same.
So you see that when you do the obversion, you get the same statement. All men are thieves is the same as no men are non-thieves. No men are thieves is the same as all men are non-thieves. Some men are thieves is the same as some men are not non-thieves. Some men are not thieves is the same as some men are non-thieves. So for obversion, when you do all this is the same. You have the true value. This is only to help you to know how some people are very clever. They make a statement and then turn it upside down. If you are not carefully interrogating and analyzing them, you may think that they are not the same. So for obversion, they are the same. Contraposition, they are the same. It is only converse that the inverse affirmative is not the same. And then a particular negation, not the same. But for version, transposition, when you turn them upside down, they mean the same thing. Our time is almost up, and I need to do this. Now, we are moving away from immediate inference. We are coming to mediate inference. Mediate inference means that you have at least two premises to draw a conclusion. Immediate is only one premise. You use that to draw a conclusion. And with mediate, you have at least two premises, and then you draw a conclusion. So before we get there, we need to explain certain terms. Major term, middle term, minor term. A middle term, because there are at least two premises. A middle term, you will have the term in the first premise, and you have the term in the second premise. It is linking the two premises together logically to draw a conclusion. So the term that is found in the first premise and also found in the second premise is called the middle term. But the middle term is not found in the conclusion. Then the major term is the predicate of the conclusion. And then the minor term is the subject of the conclusion. So when you have all men are courageous, no men are courageous. So you see that courageous is found in the first premise and it is found in the second premise. But it is not found in your conclusion. So courageous here, that's a term. Courageous here is our middle term. It's found in the first premise and it is found in the second premise. So all men are courageous, no children are courageous. Therefore, no children are men. So you will not find courageous again in our conclusion. It is only serving as a logical link between the two premises for us to draw a conclusion. So in our conclusion, no children are men. Children here become the minor term, and men becomes our major term. because children is a subject term in the conclusion, men, the predicate term in the conclusion. So we have all politicians are philanthropists. Some politicians are incorruptible people. Politicians is found in the first premise. It is found in the second premise. When the one that is common between them does not come in the conclusion, and your conclusion must start from the quantity of the second premise. All politicians are philanthropists. Some politicians are incorruptible people. Therefore, some incorruptible people are philanthropists. So you move from the quantity of the second premise, add the part of the second premise that is not common, that is not found in the first premise. And then when you do that, that will now become your subject term. And then the part of the first premise that is not in the second premise will become your predicate term. All politicians are philanthropists. Some politicians are incorruptible people. Therefore, some incorruptible people are philanthropists. Are we clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Then we take the last one before we close. We are looking at the mood and then the figure in a categorical proposition. The mood here, we are interested in the types of categorical propositions in the premise, sorry, in the argument. We said universal affirmative is A, universal negation is E, particular affirmative is I, particular negation is O. So if there are three statements here, you have either all of them being A. It could be that some are, one is A, one is B, one is O, depending on the types of propositions. So you, Mood here, identify the types of categorical propositions in the argument. All politicians are philanthropists. Some politicians are incorruptible people. Therefore, some incorruptible people are philanthropists. The first one is what? Universal affirmative, A. The second one, particular affirmative, I. The conclusion, particular affirmative, I. So the kinds of propositions in this argument will be A, I. Here, all men are courageous. No children are courageous. Therefore, no children are men. A, E, and E. So the mood here is A, E, E. Well, the first one is universal affirmative, A. The second one, universal negation, represented by the letter E. The conclusion, universal negation, represented by the letter E. So our mood is A, E, E. Then we have figure. The figure in a categorical proposition or argument is determined by the position of the middle term. We said the middle term is the term that appears in both premises, but does not appear in the conclusion. So figure 1 is where the middle term starts, is the subject term of the first premise, but it is the predicate term of the second premise. The arrangement of the middle term, where you have the middle term in the first premise being the subject term, but in the second premise, it is the predicate term. It's called figure 1. Figure 2, where the predicate term in the first premise is the same predicate term in the second premise, figure 2. Figure 3, where the subject term in the first premise is the subject term in the second premise. The middle term is the subject term in the first premise. It is a subject term in the second premise. So let's start again. The middle term is the subject term of the first premise, but the predicate term of the second premise. Figure 2, the middle term is the predicate term of the first premise, and it is a predicate term of the second premise, figure 2. Figure 3, the middle term is the subject term of the first premise, and it is also the subject term of the second premise, figure 3. Figure 4, the middle term is the predicate term of the first premise, and it is the subject term of the second premise, figure 4. So these are 4 ways of using the middle term. When you do any combination, these are the 4 ways you can get the positions of the middle term. So anytime it starts at the predicate at the subject and ends at the predicate in the second is figure 1. Anytime you find the middle term being the predicate term of the first premise and the predicate term of the second premise, figure 2. Anytime you have the subject term, the middle term being the subject term of the first premise and the subject term of the second premise, figure 3. Anytime you have the middle term being the predicate term of the first premise, but the subject term of the second premise, figure 4. So it's like formulas. You have to know them offhand. You have them on your fingertips. These are formulas for you to determine the so if you have all ladies are nice people. Some men like ladies. So you see, ladies here is a subject term. Ladies here is a predicate term. That's figure 1. So we have, therefore, some men are nice people. So we can turn it, all L is N. Some M is L. Therefore, some M is N. So we have A, I. Then you put dash 1, figure 1. The arrangement is figure 1. The second one, all ladies are nice people. All smart people are nice. Therefore, all smart people are ladies. You see figure 2. So all L is N. All S is N. You see that both serving as predicate. Therefore, all S is L. So you have A dash 2. The figure, you put dash before you put the figure there. After indicating the mood, you put dash, and you put the figure there. The same thing for all this. You can go through, because I have questions here in the slides, in the mid-semester and all that. Any question? My time is up.
So it's a request I would like to make.
Yes.
Is it possible if you can let us have some past questions so that we'll see how the exam will look like?
You guys, you are always depending on past questions.
Or any exercise question.
So go through this. The exercise is here. You see, I've given you exercise here. Do them for me. Let me see. This one. All S are P, or can I say all S is P, depending on which one. All S are P, all S are Z. Therefore, all Z are P. So this is a universal affirmative. Universal affirmative. Universal affirmative. What figure am I using here? So you have A dash what? Go through this thing carefully. You will see what I mean by figure, and it's very easy. There are 4 ways. So you see that figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, figure 4. So you have to use the formulas that we have provided. Be able to know which one is figure 1, which one is figure 2, which one is figure 3, which one is figure 4. That's all.
Okay, sir.
All right. So try them and let me see. See you next week.
Thank you.
The evening students, have they come? Is there anyone here? Evening class.